The UPS cargo plane crashed Tuesday evening as it was taking off from Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport.
When a UPS cargo plane exploded just seconds after takeoff, it wasn't just a tragedy in the skies, it was a puzzle that baffled experts for years. What invisible flaw could bring down a massive jet? And how did it escape detection despite routine inspections? The answer lies buried deep within a tiny crack that grew unnoticed, turning a trusted aircraft into a deadly fireball. This story forces us to question everything we thought we knew about aviation safety and what might still be lurking unseen in the planes above us. The moment the engine fell. On the morning of November 4th, 2025, a UPS cargo jet was preparing for what should have been a routine flight from Louisville to Dallas. The weather was calm, the skies clear, and the three experienced pilots inside the cockpit were ready to complete another cargo run. But within seconds of takeoff, an unexpected disaster unfolded. Witnesses on the ground saw flames suddenly burst from the left wing, followed by a thunderous explosion that lit the entire sky. The aircraft tilted sharply, lost altitude quickly, and crashed near a metal recycling yard just beyond the airport fence. Airport security cameras captured the harrowing moment the left engine violently tore away from the wing during the takeoff roll. Flames erupted from the joint where the engine connected to the wing's pylon, the critical arm that holds the engine in place through extreme thrust and vibration. The jet was still on the runway when this catastrophic separation occurred, forcing an immediate emergency. The explosion was so intense that the entire aircraft was engulfed in fire within seconds of the initial breakaway. Rescue crews arrived to a scene of chaos. Twisted steel trapped in flames that towered high into the morning air. Firefighters battled the blaze for hours, unaware at first what caused the catastrophic failure. The crash shattered any illusion of a simple mechanical malfunction. It was clear something far more complex was at play. The devastation left questions lingering. How did such a critical structural failure happen so abruptly and in full sight? Within the cockpit, the pilots had precious little time to react. The warning alarms started blaring just seconds after takeoff thrust was applied, signaling a problem inside the left engine assembly. The intensity of the fire escalated quickly, overwhelming the fire suppression systems and disabling crucial flight controls. The aircraft briefly lifted off before succumbing to the destructive forces, crashing violently in a matter of moments. In the aftermath, investigators combed through the wreckage, searching desperately for clues. Among the debris, two black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, were recovered remarkably intact despite the inferno. These devices would hold vital information about those final terrifying seconds. But the surface evidence alone wasn't enough to explain why a plane so meticulously maintained could fail so spectacularly. Initial assumptions pointed to an external impact or bird strike, but further analysis of the engine pylon and surrounding parts raised deeper doubts. The pylon itself, which connects the engine to the wing and withstands immense loads, had fractured in a way that suggested failure from within the metal. The fracture edges showed signs of discoloration and uneven breaks, inconsistent with sudden impacts or external damage. Something had silently compromised the strength of this crucial structure long before takeoff. The crew on that flight had faced a nightmare no pilot hopes to confront. Despite their quick, trained responses, there was nothing they could do when a fundamental piece of the plane's anatomy gave way. Their efforts to control the jet against a fire, fueled by ruptured fuel lines, were heroic but tragically insufficient. Millions of pounds of thrust became uncontrollable when the engine support snapped. But more puzzling than the event itself was the question looming over investigators. How had such a critical weakness gone unnoticed during years of routine maintenance? This mystery would soon hinge on a hidden flaw many had missed for 6 long years, buried deep within the metal of a part designed to keep engines safely airborne. Such a devastating failure begged a chilling question. Was this disaster inevitable? Or could it have been prevented if only the invisible danger had been seen? The black boxes revealed not just chaos, but a timeline, a countdown to disaster that held the key to understanding what went wrong. Early clues from black boxes. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder provided investigators with a second-by-second account of the moments leading up to the crash. These devices captured an urgent warning alarm, sounding exactly 37 seconds after the pilots pushed the throttles to full power during takeoff. That alarm continued piercing the silence for 25 relentless seconds, a harrowing signal that something inside the left engine was failing catastrophically. This was not a random alert or a minor technical hiccup. Instead, the continuous fire alarm reflected a structural collapse hidden within the engine assembly. The recordings showed pilots responding swiftly, executing emergency procedures designed precisely for engine fires. The captain calmly declared, "Fire, left engine," as the crew scrambled to cut off fuel and activate fire suppression systems. Despite their efforts, the warning light and alarms remained active, and the fire steadily grew. Flight data revealed a rapid drop in hydraulic pressure and soaring engine temperature, coupled with asymmetric thrust indicators warning of severe imbalance. The loss of the left engine thrust forced the plane into a violent yaw, pulling sharply to the left. The airborne jet struggled against physics and gravity but quickly lost control. It lifted briefly to about 100 feet before the fire damaged critical flight controls in the wing and the aircraft began to roll uncontrollably. Analyzing the data, investigators pinpointed that once the left wing's structural integrity was compromised, recovery was impossible at that low altitude. No amount of skill or experience could overcome the failure brewing within the airplane's own bones. The crew's final efforts were recorded in the voice recorder. Urgent calls to "Hold it! Hold it!" echoing through the cockpit before static swallowed all sound. This continuous alarm was more than a warning. It was the tragic countdown to failure. It lasted as the fire burned through vital hydraulic and fuel lines, igniting a blaze that spread faster than the suppression systems could respond. The black boxes stripped away assumptions and replaced them with hard data. This accident was not caused by pilot error or weather, but by a catastrophic internal failure unfolding in real time. Meanwhile, airport CCTV video confirmed the exact moment the left engine suddenly separated from the wing, a revelation that shifted the investigation's focus entirely. The footage showed the engine still partially attached to the pylon before violently detaching. Most noticeably, the pylon itself remained with the engine, disproving any external cause like a bird strike or collision. The details hinted at a far more insidious failure, one originating from inside the metal structure itself. This forced experts to look beyond surface-level damage and consider hidden weaknesses that could escape conventional inspections. The black boxes had guided them from chaos to a precise moment, but the underlying cause was yet to be fully understood. Beneath the obvious devastation, the metal held a secret, one that had been quietly worsening for years without detection: the hidden flaw inside the metal. Examining the fractured pylon under microscopes and advanced imaging, investigators found something unexpected. The edges of the broken metal were discolored and uneven, not sharp or clean as if freshly broken. This suggested a slow and gradual weakening of the material rather than a sudden shattering. The surface revealed corrosion and welding seams, pointing toward previous repairs done years earlier. The same pylon had been repaired back in 2019 after a fatigue crack was discovered during routine inspections. Engineers had ground down the damaged area, welded it, and reinforced it with a support plate. The repair was certified as successful, and for years the aircraft returned to service without incident. But buried beneath the surface, microscopic fractures had begun to re-emerge and grow, pushed further open with each flight cycle. Cracks thinner than a human hair had slowly spread, hidden deep inside the metal welds, far from the naked eye or simple visual checks. As the plane lifted off, the fatigue inside the pylon had reached a critical point. The heat from the welding had altered the metal's microstructure, making it more brittle than anticipated. This brittle section was a ticking time bomb, waiting for stress to tear it apart. The final failure happened in less than a second, as maximum thrust was applied during takeoff. The weakened pylon snapped cleanly along the old weld seam, simultaneously rupturing fuel and hydraulic lines. Fuel sprayed out like a torch, igniting instantly and feeding a fire that consumed the wing within moments. The very repair meant to extend the pylon's life had unknowingly become its weakest link. This hidden flaw was not a sudden defect, but the culmination of years of wear, imperfect maintenance, and inspection methods unable to detect deep internal damage. It was a silent threat, growing invisibly until it reached the point of no return. The fracture's unique characteristics ruled out sudden impact and mechanical neglect. The investigators realized this was not just a failure of metal, but a failure of systems, a failure to look deeper, to test harder, and to demand more from safety protocols. What had passed every visual inspection for years concealed what truly mattered. This discovery would reshape how the industry viewed aging airplanes and their hidden dangers. As this truth surfaced, it raised haunting questions about other aircraft with similar repair histories and inspection gaps. How many cracks, invisible to the naked eye, were quietly growing inside high-stress components across fleets worldwide? The fatal break of this one pylon was a warning sign, a call to action before history repeats itself. The reality of a concealed, deteriorating flaw inside the metal would soon be tied to the maintenance decisions and inspection routines that failed to catch it in time. Maintenance history and missed inspections. Following the tragic crash, investigators traced the troubled history of the left engine pylon to uncover a series of maintenance actions that ultimately failed to prevent disaster. Back in 2019, routine inspections had revealed a fatigue crack within the pylon, a sign that metal stress was already compromising its integrity. Certified maintenance contractors conducted repairs that seemed thorough at the time. The damaged metal was ground down, welded, and reinforced with a new support plate. After the work was complete, the aircraft returned to service and flew thousands of hours without any obvious issues. However, the peace was only temporary. 4 years later, in mid-2021, the pylon received further maintenance involving replacements of bolts, brackets, and joints around the assembly. Despite these efforts, inspectors did not carry out a full ultrasonic scan during this maintenance cycle. This omission proved critical. Ultrasonic testing, which sends sound waves through metal to detect hidden microfractures, was not required by regulation for that specific cycle. Instead, mechanics relied on visual checks and torque measurements, methods designed to catch surface damage or loose parts but blind to internal fatigue. On paper, the inspection was considered successful. The pylon passed every visual test, and maintenance logs indicated no abnormalities. But beneath the surface, the weld repaired 6 years prior was quietly deteriorating. Hairline fractures had begun expanding, with each flight push and landing stealing small but dangerous amounts of metal strength. Over time, these microfractures combined into a dangerous fault line that no visual inspection could detect. In September 2025, the plane returned for a 6-week heavy maintenance overhaul. Technicians stripped the paint, inspected hydraulic and fuel systems, replaced wiring harnesses, and removed surface corrosion, all part of routine care for an aging aircraft. Yet, even at this deep overhaul, there was no record of concern regarding the pylon's condition. Maintenance logs remained clean, and FAA certification was granted for the aircraft to return to service. Only days after the aircraft left the hangar, on that fateful November morning, the compromised pylon finally gave way under the maximum stress of takeoff. Metallurgists later confirmed that the fracture originated precisely where the 2019 repair had been made, marking the final stage of a slow but relentless breakdown. The welding process had altered the metal's structure, making it more brittle than anticipated. This brittleness, combined with years of stress, caused the joint to separate along the old seam faster with each flight. The sudden failure unleashed catastrophic consequences. Hydraulic and fuel lines ruptured, releasing pressurized fuel that ignited instantly and fed a rapidly spreading fire. The fire spread beneath the wing faster than any suppression system could control. With essential control surfaces damaged and weakened, the pilots were forced to face an impossible situation. This pattern of missed detection and skipped testing echoed a wider systemic issue. The aircraft's maintenance history was riddled with decisions balancing efficiency and regulatory minimums rather than absolute certainty. The visual checks alone couldn't guarantee the detection of critical, hidden fatigue. It was a costly reminder that good enough inspections might never be enough when it comes to aviation safety. And as the investigation unfolded, experts began to recognize a troubling question. How many other aircraft were slipping through the cracks, literally, because the most advanced testing wasn't required or performed? Understanding why these hairline fractures spread undetected leads directly to the science of metal fatigue, an invisible danger accumulating quietly over the decades. How fatigue cracks develop over time. Metal fatigue is a silent threat that builds slowly through repeated cycles of stress, pressure, and vibration. Every time an airplane takes off, lands, or experiences turbulence, the metal components flex and strain at microscopic levels. Over thousands of cycles, tiny cracks can form deep inside structural elements like pylons, engine struts, and wing spars. These microfractures start far beneath the surface, invisible to the naked eye and traditional visual inspections. As these cracks grow, they gradually reduce the metal's ability to withstand stress, making it more prone to catastrophic failure under load. This slow deterioration can take years or even decades to reach a dangerous point. That's why fatigue cracks often escape detection. They usually don't show outward visible signs until it's too late. By the time corrosion or distortion appears on the surface, internal damage may already be severe. Non-destructive testing methods like ultrasonic scanning and eddy current detectors are designed to combat this blind spot. These techniques use sound waves or electromagnetic fields to reveal microscopic fractures beneath the surface before they become critical. However, such testing is more time-consuming, costly, and requires specialized equipment and training, factors that influence how frequently they are mandated or performed. In the case of the UPS MD-11 crash, the aircraft was designed in the late 1980s, when inspection standards were less rigorous than today's. Many of these planes have since logged over 60,000 flying hours, far beyond what original engineers anticipated. Each flight adds incremental damage, acting like a ticking clock hidden inside the metal itself. Fatigue damage accelerates with age and usage, making older aircraft particularly vulnerable without enhanced inspection routines. Regulations currently allow visual inspections as the primary method for detecting structural damage on many parts. While quick and cost-effective, these inspections simply cannot detect early fatigue cracks nestled deep inside critical components. Without mandatory ultrasonic testing or similar advanced scans, aircraft can appear sound despite harboring invisible flaws. This understanding shines a harsh light on the 6 years of missed warnings related to the UPS plane's pylon. A key ultrasonic test was skipped at a crucial maintenance cycle. Because it wasn't mandated, the gradual growth of fractures under the welds became a ticking time bomb, camouflaged by standards designed for a different era of aviation. Fatigue cracks don't happen overnight. They are the outcome of subtle metal chemistry changes, repeated stresses, and overlooked tiny damages. The slow march toward failure underscores the importance of evolving inspection technologies and practices, because once fatigue reaches that critical breaking point, disaster can strike in less than a second. With this knowledge, the focus inevitably turns to how the industry has repeatedly failed to adopt the right measures in time. Parallels with past flights and warnings ignored. The devastating failure of the UPS Flight 2976 engine pylon echoed earlier aviation disasters, revealing a pattern alarmingly familiar to investigators. In 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 suffered a similar left pylon failure caused by improper maintenance practices that went unnoticed until takeoff. The result was a catastrophic engine separation and fiery crash that took many lives. The resemblance between these two tragedies was striking. In both cases, structural failure of the pylon destroyed critical flight controls and turned the plane into a fireball. Within seconds, similar incidents litter aviation history, such as the 1992 Trans-Air Service Flight 671, where cracked pylon bolts led to engine separation shortly after takeoff. Another case in 1993 involved Japan Airlines Flight 46E, which faced a near-identical pylon failure during climb, forcing a desperate fight to stabilize the aircraft. In 2007, Nationwide Airlines Flight 723 in South Africa saw its engine detach on takeoff, but managed a safe landing due to higher altitude. Each of these events carried a clear message: metal fatigue at critical engine mounts was a known risk demanding vigilant inspection. Despite repeated warnings and detailed accident reports from agencies like the National Transportation Safety Board, many recommendations for rigorous non-destructive testing never became mandatory across the industry. Ultrasonic scanning and other advanced methods were advised for detecting hidden fatigue cracks, but lacked enforcement, especially on older aircraft models. Instead, visual inspections remained the prevailing standard due to cost, convenience, and regulatory gaps. This reliance on visual checks proved costly. Fatigue cracks often begin deep inside the metal, well beyond the reach of the naked eye or superficial probes. Over time, cracks can grow thousands of fold before becoming visible on the surface, by which point damage may be irreversible. The UPS crash exposed how aging technical approaches and lax regulatory requirements allowed invisible hazards to slip through routine maintenance. Undetected, industry experts agree that the technology needed to find such internal defects is available but has not been used uniformly. The lack of application in some areas has been mainly due to the high cost, the complexity of operations, and the need for staff to undergo lengthy training for sophisticated testing. In addition, the maintenance planning documents for older planes often do not specify these inspections, thus putting the responsibility on contractors and mechanics' discretion and creating a situation where gaps opened can be fatal. A lot of operators insisted that in the case of planes that are going to be retired, only basic inspections would keep them in the air if perfectly managed, but the UPS crash proved the idea to be quite optimistic, and dangerously so. Thus, it was made more than evident that past failures had not even led to a major overhaul of the safety regulatory framework needed to make fleets secure. Maintenance that was once accepted as good enough is not sufficient anymore. The practice of not acknowledging or postponing the issuing of very important warnings depicted a tragic indifference that was rooted in routine success rather than in the alertness of the operators. With each weekend of the anniversaries of these accidents, there were calls for change that disappeared as soon as the headlines faded. In the meantime, old aircraft continued to fly with structural weaknesses that were silently and slowly developing. This past reveals a bitter truth. Aviation catastrophes are hardly ever singular events. They are usually the last episodes of ignored lessons and small, through unnoticed cracks that gradually expand into fatal faults. The UPS air disaster is a grim reminder of the urgent requirement for a fundamental transformation in the inspection culture and regulations. Behind every mechanical failure lies a story of human endurance as the crew battles chaos in real time. The human side, pilot's final fight. Inside the cockpit of UPS Flight 2976, 3 seasoned professionals faced a nightmare scenario few can imagine. Captain Richard Wartenberg, First Officer Lee Truitt, and Flight Engineer Dana Diamond shared more than 30 years of combined experience, having flown countless difficult cargo missions with precision and calm. Their routine takeoff turned into an emergency within seconds, as alarms erupted and flames burst near the left engine. The warning bell was relentless, cutting through the controlled silence just as the aircraft reached takeoff thrust. The pilots had just passed V1 speed, the point of no return, meaning aborting takeoff risked skidding off the runway. Instead, they committed to flying despite knowing the danger growing on their wing. The captain's voice, steady under pressure, calmly announced, "Fire left engine," setting the tone for the tense battle ahead. The first officer quickly reduced engine power and reached to cut fuel flow, while the flight engineer activated the fire suppression system, hoping to extinguish the blaze. But the warning light persisted, and the fire continued spreading, fed by ruptured fuel lines. Cockpit alarms multiplied, hydraulic pressure dropping, engine temperature rising, asymmetric thrust warnings, all signs of a critical systems failure that demanded immediate control. Despite the chaos, the flight crew worked through each checklist with practiced efficiency, struggling to maintain control as the left wing rapidly lost lift. The jet briefly climbed to roughly 100 feet, giving a fleeting glimpse of hope. But the damage deep within the wing compromised control surfaces. The plane began to roll violently, responding to the fire's destruction of hydraulic lines that powered the flight controls. "Hold it! Hold it!" the first officer shouted, his voice captured in the cockpit voice recorder's final moments. The crew fought desperately against forces far beyond their control. A structural failure born years earlier in maintenance hangars and inspection reports. Their training, skills, and teamwork could not overcome physics and the rapid destruction unfolding in real time. The recording ends abruptly, followed by silence and the devastating impact moments later. Aviation experts agree that once the structural integrity of a wing is compromised at such a low altitude, recovery is virtually impossible. The fate of Flight 2976 was sealed not by pilot error, but by the slow failure of metal and systems hiding beneath layers of oversight. What makes their story haunting is not just the loss, but the dedication these pilots exhibited under extreme pressure. They did everything by the book, leaving no stone unturned in those final seconds. Yet their actions could only delay the inevitable collapse, never prevent it. Their struggle reveals a human dimension often lost behind technical jargon and investigation reports. Skilled people battling unseen mechanical failures, caught in a split-second race against disaster. It is a somber reminder that behind every aviation accident are heroic attempts to save lives, efforts made tragically futile by gaps in maintenance and inspection. These final moments underscore a critical lesson. Even flawless human performance cannot compensate for hidden systemic flaws. The true cause of this tragedy unfolded long before wheels lifted off the runway, rooted in decisions and details obscured beneath the surface. The industry's reckoning and changes ahead. In the aftermath of the UPS Flight 2976 tragedy, the aviation industry faced a stark wake-up call that safety could no longer be taken for granted. Regulators and airlines immediately grounded all MD-11 aircraft in their fleets to conduct thorough, precautionary inspections of pylons and fuel systems. This decisive action underscored the urgency of addressing hidden vulnerabilities in aging aircraft designs. The critical question looming over everyone was how to prevent another disaster born of unseen flaws. The Federal Aviation Administration, alongside UPS, proposed a series of urgent safety measures aimed at transforming inspection standards. The first major recommendation was mandating ultrasonic and other non-destructive testing techniques on high-stress components, especially on aircraft older than 25 years. These advanced scans could detect microscopic cracks, invisible to standard visual inspections, directly targeting the kind of hidden damage responsible for the crash. Next, regulators stressed the importance of strict compliance with manufacturer-approved maintenance procedures. They explicitly banned shortcuts like using forklifts to handle engines, a practice implicated in the famous American Airlines Flight 191 crash decades earlier. This move emphasized that efficiency must never trump thoroughness and safety, highlighting the human and procedural elements intertwined with technical reliability. The FAA also called for a complete overhaul of maintenance record-keeping by advocating for a digital system to track repairs and inspections. This technology promise aimed to prevent data loss, miscommunication, and gaps between primary contractors and subcontractors, which can contribute to overlooked damage or incomplete maintenance histories. Accurate, accessible records are a foundational piece in ensuring no warning signs slip through the cracks. Finally, the industry agreed on the need for stronger oversight by certified FAA engineers, moving away from relying solely on reports from outsourced maintenance companies. This shift toward enhanced accountability aimed to rebuild trust and vigilance, ensuring inspections are conducted with the utmost integrity and expertise. It recognized that human factors and organizational culture play crucial roles in aviation safety. Yet, the regulatory landscape regarding the proposed changes is not mature yet. They are largely recommendations at present, rather than laws. The regulatory agencies and the airline industry still argue about the right mix of safety issues, costs, and operational feasibility, especially when it comes to old planes. The advocates for retirement of older aircraft are getting stronger, while the maintenance culture and rigorous inspections proponents argue that the safety of these planes is only possible through a thorough and sincere commitment to proactive maintenance and rigorous inspections. The affected families and communities find such discussions to be of no use. The tragic event of Flight 2976 has not only drawn the attention of the public, but also the authorities to the shortcomings of the current standards. It has given an insight into how a combination of old policies, ignored warnings, and an unprofessional attitude in the maintenance department may lead to a disaster. Making these changes permanent is the problem now. The accident brought up to the aviation world a question that keeps on haunting them. A tiny crack that had been unnoticed during 6 years of inspections, what would still be the number of other hazards that would be hidden in the thousands of aircraft that are flying all over the world? This question forces the industry to realize that safety in aviation is not a state achieved. It is a continuous process that requires constant improvement through discipline, accountability, and most importantly, the commitment to listen and learn. The accident of UPS Flight 2976 is a huge lesson to the industry and to society in general. Safety is never out of the picture. It needs continuous supervision, high-end technology, and above all, a firm decision not to accept good enough as a standard when people's lives are at stake. Every flight carries the weight of past mistakes, but also the opportunity to rewrite history before tragedy strikes again. If you found this deep dive insightful, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that reveal the hidden truths in aviation safety.